All right. Well, welcome back to Introduction to Programming with Python. Alongside Susan Ibach, I am Christopher Harrison. And where we last left our hero, which was much more difficult for me to say than it should have been, what we did was we displayed out string literals. So what happened was Susan was doing the demos. She typed something out. She put it inside a print, and it printed out on the screen, which is certainly something that you are going to be doing, things like error messages, prompts, and the like. But at some point, we want our program to be interactive. At some point, we need to get something from the user that if I just simply go in and hard code that this is always going to display this, I'm sort of limiting the reusability of that program. So now we want to get into working with input from the user. We want to get into actually making things a bit more dynamic. And that's exactly what we're going to do with Module 3, which is going to be string variables, variables in general, and getting the user to input in a value.
Yeah, absolutely. We can be a lot more interactive when we've got a user telling us things as we go.
Exactly, yeah. Two-way conversation. We're having a two-way conversation. See how that works? It allows you to do more. So then that way, if you want to be able to handle payment information on a website or put in your address so that way people know where to ship your products, they can go ahead and do that. If you're dealing with information about insurance policies, if you're looking to set up really any form of calculation, where is it? I should go ahead and grab it here. There we go. Go ahead and grab. I love this thing.
Cortana.
Ask Cortana to tell you a joke. By the way, for those of you who do have Windows Phone 8.1, ask Cortana to do an impersonation or to do an impression.
Oh, I haven't. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've asked Cortana where Master Chief is, and I've asked Cortana for a few jokes and had a few good ones. My personal favorite Cortana joke, a Roman walks into a bar and holds up 2 fingers and says, 5 beers, please. All right, on that note,
so moving right along. All right. So the question is then, how do we get input from the user? So for right now, again, we're kind of keeping things relatively down low. And so you're going to notice that we're not going to be building up web pages. We're not going to be doing voice recognition or anything like that. But the principles still stay the same. So regardless of where the user is actually entering in the information, be it on a touch keyboard, be it via voice, the fact of the matter is that you're still going to be getting textual data in from a user somehow. So a lot of the concepts that we're going to be going over are still going to apply regardless of where you are. That being said, we are going to stick with the command line, and I think that's always a great way to learn a programming language.
Just one less thing to worry about in the short term.
Exactly. I don't want to set up a button in an event handler in a text box, and you know what? Just let's keep it nice and simple. When we're focused on the language syntax, let's do that. And so that's what we want to do here. So the question then becomes, well, how do we ask the user for information? So let's take a look at my slide here. And right here is a little bit of a basic command. So I'm going to highlight that first part right there, that little input. And input is the command that you're going to use to get information from the user. So you can almost think of this as the opposite to print, that if print is displaying information, input is how you're getting input from the user.
Yep.
Now, the way that input is going to work, and we'll see this when I get in and do my demo here in a moment, is you're going to notice right here that we've got the opportunity to display a prompt. That if all of a sudden we just simply said input, and I'm just looking at a blank screen with a cursor, not going to exactly know what it is that I'm supposed to type. So fortunately, input allows us to add in a prompt. So we can go in and say, what is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color? Whatever it is that we want to put into there, we can now prompt the user for that. So I'm going to break this down again into kind of 2 parts. Part 1, input, that's the command. Accept information from the user. And then part 2 is going to be that little prompt, and that's what's now going to display out to get something back from the user. Now, there's also this little thing right here, name. Now, let's kind of go with English here. Name in English, of course, means, well, name.
A person's name?
Yeah, a person's name.
Or a thing's name?
A thing's name. It's how you're going to identify something. So you're going to notice, if we go back to the code here, what is your name? Well, we'd obviously expect somebody to type in their name. So we've got this little thing over here called name. Now, we're going to talk about what this thing is in a minute here. For right now, though, let's treat that tantamount to magic. Let's not worry too much about that. Trust me, this is one of those things where you just have to kind of go with us here. Promise. We will, absolutely will explain what all of that means. Promise you. We're just not going to do it quite yet. So for right now, we're just going to focus in on that part right there. That's all that we're going to focus in on. So, again, that input function allows us to get information in, and it's going to give us back whatever it is that the user typed in. So whatever the user typed in, that's now what we're going to get back. And then you are going to notice that we can use a variable to remember what was entered in. Again, we're going to talk more about variables here in a couple of minutes. So kind of just
we'll get into that.
Stick with us there. Now you are going to notice that we could call it whatever we want. So if you wanted to go in and maybe just call that, for example, Wibble instead of name, you could go in and do that. It'll work.
It'll work.
Won't make any sense, but it will work. So you're going to notice right here, we're already teaching you a bit of a good programming style here. Use names that make sense. So if you look at a name of something and you're going, I don't know what it is that that's supposed to do, take another look at the name that you've got, because you've probably got a bad name there. Okay. So let me go to Visual Studio here. Let's go in and take a look at a demo. Get out of my slide deck here. Okay, so let me go in and create a brand new project. So just File, New Project, Python application, and Module 3. And this is going to be strings and variables. There we go. And then let's go ahead and hit OK. All right, so again, we've got that little print hello world. I'm going to get rid of that.
Yep. Don't need that right now.
Exactly. And I'm actually just going to use the code that was on the slide there. So I'm just going to say name equals, and we'll say input. And, ooh, that looks kind of cool.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
All right, absolutely.
In the meantime, what is your name?
What is your quest?
Exactly. All right. Now, what I'm going to do, so now we've got the what is your name here, is I'm going to kind of do this in chunks. So I'm just going to click Start up here. And sure enough, you're going to notice my screen prompts me and says, what is your name? Well, my name happens to be Christopher, so I'm going to type out Christopher. I'm going to hit Enter, and it just simply says, press the any key to continue. Not very exciting.
Yeah, but you know, maybe it took the value, but it did prompt you. You got to type something in.
I did get, yay, I got to type something in, yay! There was much rejoicing, yay. But yeah, so it at least prompted me for that, but you know, it didn't really do anything else with it. So I'm going to actually go one step further here just to kind of show that it did in fact store this. Let's go in and say print, and for right now I'm just going to say name.
Sure.
And now, once again, we'll go ahead and hit Start. I love these little touchscreens.
Yeah.
And let's go in and say Christopher, Enter, and sure enough, it prints out Christopher.
Cool.
Fantastic.
You know, there was a neat little trick that somebody showed me with this, but I thought was kind of cool. And the way, you know how it shows the, you know, what is your name, and then the cursor's right after it? I ran into somebody who actually wanted the cursor to be on the next line.
Okay.
And I was like, that's an interesting little question. Like, how could I get the cursor to appear on the next line? And what they did is they actually used a print statement to say, what is your name? And then on the next line, they just said input nothing.
There you go.
So it put that way the cursor was on the next line. Kind of
nice.
clever.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yep.
All right.
Creative coding.
Yeah. Exactly. And again, you know, it's one of those where there's certainly going to be numerous ways that you could do that. I suppose you could also do that with a backslash n. You know, so again, multiple ways to solve the exact same problem. So, you know, but I do like that sort of print the display and then input separately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make for a cleaner screen sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right. So now, I did tell you there was a little bit of magic there. We just simply had that little, NAME equals and input and blah, blah, blah. That's what we had. We should probably define a little bit better what that name was. Well, what that name was is what we as developers, as coders, which is now all of us, all of us, we like to call those variables. And Susan actually put together pretty much all of these slides, did a fantastic job with them. And I love the analogy that Susan has here, is that it's a box. What's a box? It's a container. It's something that I can put something else into. I can store something into it, so that way I can come back and get back to it later. So whatever it is that you're looking to store to use later, that's exactly what a variable is going to allow you to do.
Yep.
So, I always like to go with a slightly different analogy. So I'm going to go with my analogy here, but I do love this one. I always like to go with a math analogy.
Okay.
I forgot to warn everybody there was going to be math today. I know.
You're asking a lot.
I know.
Right. Some of these people are in time zones. It's getting late.
I know, but I'm on my second cup of coffee, so I'm all set.
Go with the math.
Go with the math. So if we come back to my slide here so I can kind of draw my screen, remember back to algebra class where you had something like 206 minus x equals 42?
Yeah, absolutely. Basic algebra, 206, and you had to solve and figure out what x was.
Exactly. What was x? Well, x, as it turned out, was really nothing more than a placeholder. That's all that it was. It's just a placeholder. So you would go in, you would do your math, and don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole math, and you would determine that x in this case is going to be 164. 164. I'm double checking my math.
Okay.
Okay, yep.
So you picked a tough one. But I see that the answer was 42, and that's important.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yep. The answer is always 42. But in any event, so right here, what you're going to notice is that x is a placeholder. So what's a variable? It's a placeholder. It's a box. Whatever analogy it is that you like there, whatever it is that's going to help make it stick for you, I want you to go with that. So it's something where you can store it and come back to it later. Now, needless to say, by the way, why is it that people say needless to say and say it anyway?
I don't know, but I have a feeling you're about to.
I am. Needless to say, and I'm going to say it anyway, you can have multiple variables. And in fact, you're very rarely going to be able to write any level of a program, of a script, or anything that goes beyond kind of a basic hello world without having some level of variable usage. And so what you're going to notice is that you can go in and create multiple variables as needed and give them essentially whatever name it is that you might want. Now, how can you then go in and access it? Well, just use the name.
Yep.
Now, let's kind of break this down a little bit. So we already saw name equals input. Now, what is input going to do? Input is going to prompt the user for a value, and whatever it is that it gets back, it's going to put into that little placeholder. So if I had on my screen here that little input, and I typed in, for example, Christopher, T-O-P-H-E, it looks like one of your kids grabbed a crayon there. So in any event, if somebody wrote out or typed in Christopher, what's going to happen is this is now going to wind up inside of that name variable. So everywhere that I go in and I use name, that's now going to be, in this case, Christopher.
Okay, makes sense.
So this line of code right here would be equivalent, and I'm going to do it with Zoom It because it'll be a little bit easier for me to do. This would be equivalent to me typing out print Christopher.
Yep.
Those two lines of code are equivalent. Why? Well, because again, name is simply that placeholder for, in our case, Christopher, because that was what the user typed in. Cool. And now I need to kind of clean up my screen there. All right.
Getting a little cluttered.
It is. And there's a little screenshot. When you did this, you used a shorter name
that way with
of
Bob.
Bob. Yeah.
I'm a lazy, I told you, I'm a lazy coder.
Yep.
Even my test names are lazy.
Bob. All right. Now, like we mentioned before, a variable is a box. It's a placeholder. And so if I take, for example, that little box and I dump that box out, what I've got now is an empty box. So could I take that empty box and could I put something else inside of there? And the answer, of course, is absolutely. So if I take that box, I empty it out, and I put something else inside of it, now what's going to be inside of there is going to be whatever that new value is. So if we come back to the slide here, what I want you to notice, I'm going to do it with zoom in. That's a little bit easier for me. There we go. We'll go with blue. So what you're going to notice here is that we said name equals input, and then they typed in the name. By the way, one real quick side note here, you are going to notice that we don't need a declaration in front of that variable.
Yeah, and that's one of those ones, and you can open up a whole can of worms of, oh, but you have to be able to declare your variables. Let's not get into the great debate, or is it better to use a programming language that requires you to declare variables or not declare variables? Remember, we said Python is a very forgiving language that is trying to make it easy for you to get going with code. So no, you do not have to declare your variables before you use them. If you use a variable name in a line of code, it goes, I've never heard of name, I'll just make it now.
Yep, exactly, yeah.
There's pros and cons, but yeah.
And
it is what it is.
and this is a debate that we could get into for the next 4 hours, but we're not going to do it. So there it is. So it will just let you declare your variables right there on the fly, and it will try to figure out what it is that you're doing. One of the things that we'll see over the next couple of modules is that this does sometimes wind up causing a little bit of problem when we're trying to deal with numbers and things like that. But for right now, with strings especially, it will just kind of roll with the punches.
It is what it is.
Exactly.
Yep.
There we go.
Every programming languages has things you will like about it and things you will not like about it.
Yep.
So, but anyway, it's good to just be aware that no, Python does not actually require you to declare the variable before you use it in your code.
Yep. Okay, cool. So what you're going to notice here is sort of the same demo that we had before. So what is your name? And then print, and then whatever the name is. And then what you're going to notice here is on the next line, let me just change my color here. We said name equals Mary. Now, one of the things that I always like to do whenever I'm kind of doing demos is I always like to show you based on what we've already seen. So what did we already see? How do I take something and put it into a variable? That little equal sign right there. So that little equal sign, let me just clear out my screen here, kind of make it a little easier to read. That little equal sign, that's what told Python to take whatever it was that came back from here and put it there. It was that equal sign.
Yep.
So if I use that equal sign again, and I say just hard-coded string Mary, and I use that equal sign, and I put that right there into name, what do we think is now going to happen?
I'm thinking that maybe the contents of name have changed.
And I'm thinking you're right.
Awesome.
So again, keeping with that box analogy, we took the box, dumped it upside down, and then we put Mary into it. So down at the very bottom, you're going to notice that we print out the name. So if we take a look at the results here, kind of little sample down here at the very bottom, what you're going to notice, and I'm thinking yellow is going to show up really well here, you're going to notice that we typed in Bob. That was the initial name.
Yep.
And so kind of going back to before, what we did was we took that input, we printed that out, so that's why we got Bob.
Yep.
Then on the next line, we updated that to Mary, and then we printed that out. So when we go to print that out the second time, now what you're going to notice is that there is Mary the second time.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So with that, let's go in and demo this here. So let me kick out of my slides. Discard, and I want to be there. There we go. Okay, so we're going to keep on keeping on here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw in a real quick comment here. Collect a name from the user.
Yep.
And let's just go ahead and display the name.
Excellent habits, commenting your code.
Absolutely. Yep. And then now let's go ahead and update the value. And let's go ahead and say name equals, and let's say Christopher Harrison, for example.
Picking a name at random.
At random,
yes.
Exactly. And now let's go in and say, we'll say print name. Beautiful. So now, one more time, I'm going to click Start. There we go. So what is your name? I'm going to put in Susan there.
All right.
And then I'm going to hit Enter. And now what you're going to notice is that it prints out Susan the first time. So again, let's go with a better color. There we go. Yeah, you know, one of those things, the tool that we're using to draw on our screens when we're not in PowerPoint is a little tool called Zoom It. You can fire up Bing, do a search for Zoom It, all one word, and it'll be like the first link there, download it. It's available from Microsoft. It was a tool that somebody named Mark Wasinovich put together. It's a fantastic presentation tool. If you're doing presentations, can't suggest it highly enough. But every now and then it just wants to go, well, you probably meant a straight line. I was slightly off, so it said, well, you probably want a straight line, and that's why I'm slightly off down there. But in any event, so you're going to notice print name. There we go. And then what you're going to notice right there is, once again, print name and then Christopher. So we took what was in name, got rid of it, and then put something else inside of there. Cool. All right. Now, something tells me that there is some form of rules around naming variables.
I mean, I can't just come up with any name I want for my variable? I mean, are you going to be picky about this?
I think so.
All right.
I think so. So let's break it down here. So let's talk about some variable names here. And let's highlight the rules first. So first of all, number one, the rules are cannot contain spaces.
Makes sense.
So got to have, all one word.
Okay.
Because really, if you put in a space, now Python is trying to figure out, okay, well, did you mean a space because you were going on to the next thing, or did you mean a space that's going to be part of this?
Yeah, or is it two variables, or
exactly.
Yeah, it is confusing.
Yeah.
Space is meaningful in Python.
Yeah.
There are some programming languages where having spaces in one place or another doesn't affect your code at all. Python is actually, there are situations we'll see later today where adding spaces or removing spaces can actually change the way your code runs.
Yeah.
So you do need to be cognizant of spaces in Python, and in variable names, it's just flat out not allowed.
Exactly. Yep. Can't have spaces. Number two is it is case sensitive. And if I
That's a big deal.
It is. If I was to say the number one question that I get whenever I'm teaching any language to a group of people that are learning this for the first time, the most common question, probably the first question that I always get is this case sensitive? Now, my answer to this is actually not to answer the question. That my answer to this is treat everything like it's case sensitive. Because if you treat something like it's case sensitive and it's not, you're fine.
That's true.
But if you treat something like it's not case sensitive and it is, you wind up running into problems. And, one of the questions that kind of come through on the chat window have been things like, databases and so forth. So obviously we can start working with other external systems. Well, one of the things that you find from time to time is that you might be programming in a language, let's say like PowerShell. And PowerShell is not case sensitive, but PowerShell is going to be accessing other things, maybe like SharePoint. And SharePoint is case sensitive all over the place. So if I'm treating PowerShell like it's not case sensitive, now all of a sudden I'm going to run into a problem because I typed something in that's going to be passed into SharePoint where it is case sensitive, and now all of a sudden something breaks. So treat everything like it's case sensitive because it's going to help you avoid those kind of what I like to call mixed case scenarios where it's case sensitive here and not case sensitive here. And really just in the long run, it's going to make your life just that much easier.
So this is just one of those best practices we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
So every now and then, you just want to make sure that, as a best practice, just assume that an uppercase N and a lowercase n does not mean the same thing.
Exactly.
And you're talking about it here in variables, but it's also important to be aware that that's true of commands as well. There was actually a comment earlier inside the questions that said, hey, I typed input with an uppercase I, and it didn't recognize the command. It gave me an error. Well, those commands are case sensitive as well. And I also just want to quickly mention with the Q&A, something's going on with the Q&A display right now, so I can't see the questions you're posting at the moment. So if we're not answering, we're not ignoring you. We just aren't seeing the questions. So we'll try and get that sorted during the next break. But so the commands are case sensitive as well as the variables.
Yep, exactly. The other last rule is it cannot start with a number.
And that's one that people don't expect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is something that's kind of common. But if you're brand new, yeah, exactly. You're like, why can't I call this, 3 names? And I'd be storing 3 names inside of there and just use the number 3. It's just it is one of those things where the programming language, if it sees a number, it's expecting number. Now that's not to say that you couldn't do name and then the number 3. That would be fine.
Yep.
But you can't start with a name.
Yeah, that's just one of the rules.
Exactly. Now let's keep on keeping on here with our variables, and let's talk about some guidelines here. So this is a big one for me. Should be descriptive.
Oh, the number of times I have seen code where the variable name is A or X. And I'm like, well, the thing is, when you start writing code that has 26 different variables, you start going, what was an X again? Where did I store that? Did I store that in X or A?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, if there's, there's a
Spit it
book.
out, Christopher. Spit it out. You can do this.
I'm going to get there. So there's a book out there, refactoring code, and it's kind of written for Java, but it's put together by Martin Fowler and a couple of other people, and it has this great concept in there called smells.
Okay.
That code can sometimes have smells, which it's sort of like, you go to the fridge, you open up the carton of milk, you give it a whiff, and it smells a little off. Now, just because it smells off, does that necessarily mean that the milk is bad? No. It means that it might be bad, but you're not going to know until you taste it. And I always love this concept that I'll go ahead and, I'll take a swig. Oh, that's awful. And then I immediately, hand it to somebody else. Here, try this. And, it's not so much, I almost kind of understand the concept of, getting somebody else to test that. The part that I can never understand is the person who's now accepting this. You were just given information. This milk is bad. Here, try this. And of course, what do you do? Okay.
Duly noted, Christopher. The next time you hand me a glass of milk, I'm not drinking it.
Exactly. There you go.
But you're right. But you're right. Sometimes you look at code, and when there's a sense to it. You look at the code, and instinctively the reaction is, I can read this, I can follow it, it's clean and easy to understand, or, okay, this may work, but I'm having real trouble understanding it.
Exactly, yeah, and it's not necessarily that it's bad, it just doesn't look quite right. There might be something off there. And so there's that little concept called a smell. And one of the smells is, and I know this is going to contradict us a little bit here, is having comments in your code. Now, that's not to say don't put in comments. Comments are wonderful. But if you have a comment and it's having to explain a line of code, you really should stop and take another look at the line of code that you've written and make sure that the line of code is as readable as possible. And sometimes there's nothing you can do. Sometimes it's just, some little library, or that unfortunately the way that something is built is just a little clunky, and that's just the way it is, and that's fine. But there are times where what you're doing is you're using that comment instead of just writing code that's easy to understand. So if you have a comment saying X is used to store the user's age, that's a problem. That instead of using X, you should be using user age.
Yeah, it's very good to have descriptive names. It makes a difference. And I strongly recommend, if storing a date, or if you're storing a date in particular is a great one. Don't just call it date. First of all, that might be a reserved word that you're not allowed to use in certain programming languages. Call it birth date. Call it expiry date. Be specific about what it is. But yet again, you don't need variable names that are 82 characters long, because that's going to take you a long time to type, and we're all lazy coders. But even though I'm a lazy coder, I do use meaningful names for my variables.
Exactly. The other thing is about casing. So let's kind of take a step back here. And remember, again, case sensitive. So you do want to choose a scheme, if you will, which is basically just make this decision and just always do this over and over again. And so I've given you the 2 common ones, which is Pascal casing and camel casing, which are written exactly the way that they're set up. So Pascal casing starts with a capital letter, and then every word thereafter, no underscores or anything like that. It's just simply appended right in. And then there's camel casing, which starts with a lowercase letter.
Which is, if you look at the slide there where it says the word favorite sign and your favorite sign, the horoscope, those are actually examples of camel casing.
Yeah. And in Python, camel casing generally is the way to go. Guess what day it is? Sorry. There's a handful of people that will have gotten that reference.
I didn't get that reference at all, Christopher, just for the record.
That was a U.S.-centric reference.
If there was someone else out there who didn't get it, I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
all right, moving on.
That was a U.S.-centric one. I apologize. Yeah.
Just keep going.
I'm just going to keep going. All right. So back over here, then let's go ahead and take a look at some of the different variables that are there, and let's go ahead and highlight the ones that are good. Well, starting up at the very top, we've got variable 1.
So variable 1, that should be valid.
It's valid.
It's got a number inside the name, which is okay.
But it's at the end.
But it is kind of a weird name for a variable. It's not very descriptive.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I look at that, I don't know what's inside of it. So I'm going to highlight that one in red. That one's not really good.
Now, first name, there's a definite problem with the first name because I've got a space in the variable name, and Python's going to get confused by that.
All right, so we can't use that one.
Date, that's one Python would probably work if I use that as a variable name, but the problem with that is it's not descriptive. It said, what date are you storing in there? We often work with a lot of different dates, start date, end date, birth date. Be specific.
Okay.
3 name, Python won't even let me do that. It's going to give me an error because I'm using a number at the beginning of the variable name.
Okay.
DOB, that's an interesting one. It's a valid name. I said Python's not going to give me an error because I've done that. But at the same time, it's a little confusing. I think it might depend who I was writing the code for. Like, you know what? 3-letter acronyms exist everywhere.
They do. TLAs, 3-letter acronym.
Yeah. And if it's an acronym, but everybody in that organization knows and uses every day, then it's okay to use an acronym for your variable name. But,
exactly.
So if I'm working at a hospital and I'm storing date of birth and everybody refers to it as DOB, then I think that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if it's not a commonly used acronym, I would stay away from it.
Okay, so we'll put that one in yellow. How about date of birth?
I'm good with that. I like that. Date of birth, it doesn't have any spaces of a name, no numbers at the beginning, and it's descriptive. I think that one's good.
Okay, and then how about your favorite sign in the horoscope?
Again, descriptive, doesn't contain any spaces, doesn't have a number, but I'm lazy, so I would just find that really long to type. So that would be the only reason I would avoid that one.
And going back to something that you mentioned before, context is key. Context is king. So if I'm writing a sign a program where I need to know somebody's favorite sign, I know what we're going to be talking about there. So if I was doing something that involved horoscopes, I'm going to know that's what I'm writing. So if I say sign, I know that I'm not talking about a street sign. Yeah. I know that I'm not talking about a neon sign. I know that I'm already talking about horoscope. So I could handle this without writing out in the horoscope in that type of an application. So context is key. And again, kind of going back to DOB, is that are abbreviations bad? Abbreviations are a smell. Mm-hmm. That it can be bad, but not necessarily. Context is king. So if this is something that you would absolutely need to know in order to work in your industry, in order to do your job, then it's perfectly acceptable to use it. If everybody knows exactly what that is, perfect. If it's something where you're having to define it, again, that's a smell, might not necessarily want to go in and do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, prior to that little spot, what we did was we took the box, we dumped it out, and we put in a brand new value.
Yep.
How about taking the box and adding something to it?
All right.
Or working with the value that's already there.
Okay.
Well, this is where manipulating our variables come into play. So why not have the ability to just simply use the plus sign to concatenate things together? So we'll grab somebody's first name, we'll grab somebody's last name, and then we'll go ahead and concatenate all of that together.
That's a really useful thing. You want to, because a lot of times when you're displaying output on a screen, it's going to be a combination of information you have in variables and static text that you want to display. So that's very practical.
Yep, absolutely. And sure enough, you're going to notice, and pen, and there we go. And there, of course, down below is my little hello, John.
So I got to say, that's it worked, but it's kind of, well, I don't have any spaces or anything between them.
Yeah, that'd be a good variable name, I guess.
Space?
Well, no, see, hello, John Doe, see, because there's no space in there. All
right.
Okay. But seriously, folks, so you're going to notice that we do have the ability to add in those spaces as needed. So if you want to put in spaces, feel free to put in spaces. So whatever, string concatenation it is that you want to do, whatever combination of strings that it is that you want to put together, you absolutely have that ability. And so now you're going to notice that's a much better display. I've got my spaces between hello, John, and Doe.
And we were talking earlier about coders make mistakes. I can almost guarantee that somewhere along the way you're going to be doing something like this and you can either have too many spaces or not enough spaces. So just get used to whenever you're doing that, take a look at the output and then go back and fix the spaces afterwards.
Exactly.
We all do it.
Yep. Okay, so let's go back to my Visual Studio here and let's take a look at a demo. So what I'm going to do is, real quick, I'm just going to comment out those little spots right there. And this is one of my favorite little things to do is a lot of times, especially when you're like debugging or just kind of playing with things, you want to turn off, if you will, a bit of code. Well, you can just go ahead and comment that little bit of code, and it's treated just like normal text, or normal text comment, I guess would be a clearer way to do that. So you're going to notice that I can just put comment, and now both of those are gone.
Yep.
So now, and I'm just going to leave those down at the very bottom there. There we go. Let's go ahead and say, create a friendly output. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say print, and we'll say name plus, whoops, let's go the other direction. Let's say hello, and then plus, and then name, just like that. Yep.
Perfect.
And so now, let's go ahead and hit start. What is your name? Christopher. Hit enter. And now you're going to notice that I've got hello, Christopher. I still had the one little one from before. Let's just comment that. Come here. There we go. All right. Perfect. And now let's start. What is my name? Christopher. And then hello, Christopher.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Okay. So now, oops, I want to be here. I'm going to go back to my slides. Now, you're also going to notice that you could go in and kind of do whatever you want. So, little storyteller, kind of a Mad Libs, if you will, here.
Yep. And it's funny, it seems so simple, but I have seen an entire business based off this basic functionality. I recently had a friend who got married. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to find a suitable wedding gift for them. And I discovered that you can order personalized romance novels. You provide the names of the characters, their hair color, their eye color, and it inserts their names into the story. So, so it says, Christopher spotted his wife Karin across the crowded room.
Sure.
Her blonde hair flowing in the wind inside the room because the window was open. But the neat thing is, really, if you think about how the code was implemented to do that, in the end, all they did was the print statement was an entire book. Mm-hmm. And everywhere the name appeared in the book, they just replaced with name typed in by user.
Yep.
Eye color replaced by eye color entered by user. And they have built an entire business off that functionality.
There's your $1 million idea.
Yeah.
And away you go. Yeah. So
I have a friend who was asking, would like crime writer version. So if you're really mad at somebody, you could have them write them into a mystery of some sort.
Perfect. All right, so you'll notice that you can do kind of all sorts of really complex string concatenations as well there. Now, one of the problems with dealing with strings is that the user can input whatever it is they might want.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm going to take whatever it is they've given me and I need to tweak it. I just need to make sure it's uppercase or lowercase or otherwise. And so wouldn't it be nice if we had some way to go in and manipulate those things? And so sure enough, you're going to notice that we've got that capability. We have a little example right here where we go ahead and we say message equals blah, blah, blah. And then you'll notice that we can do lower, we can do upper, we could do swap case. I wonder what those are going to do.
Yeah, those are lower. I think I might be able to guess. I think lower is going to take the phrase and convert it to lowercase. Uh-huh. Whereas upper is going to convert it to uppercase. Okay. Not too sure about swap case, though. That's an interesting one.
Well, something tells me if I go like this, there you go.
Oh,
there's our little output.
It took everything uppercase, made it lowercase, and everything lowercase made it uppercase. So it swapped the casing.
There you go. So there's our lower, there's our upper, and then you'll notice on the swap case, and let me kind of highlight that little hello right there, what you're going to notice is that that little hello, let me zoom in on it, that first little y there is now lower, whereas when we initially had it, it was upper. So we took all the cases and just, well, swapped them out.
Neat.
Perfect. Well, let's go in and kind of demonstrate that.
Yeah, because that's very useful, because sometimes people type things in. I'd be working things where people maybe typed in an abbreviation for a country, and you want a 3-letter abbreviation, and some people type it lowercase, and some people type it uppercase, and some do like the first letter uppercase and the rest in lowercase. But you kind of want it consistent when you're keeping the information or storing it in a database or something later. So being able to take the data they've inputted, switching it to uppercase, so even no matter how they entered it, I wanted an uppercase, that would be awesome.
Yep, yeah, consistency in a database. A lot of people have been asking database questions. Yeah, consistency in a database, that's a big thing.
Yep.
All right, so let me come back over to here, and I'm going to just kind of update my code, and I'm going to say country equals input, and let's go, what country do you live in? And we'll go ahead and do that. And then I'm also going to say country equals country dot, oh, something cool is happening.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, later? Okay, that little box is cool.
It's kind of cool. Okay, all right. So in any event, I'm going to go and I'm just going to say upper, like that. So what that's going to do, and this is, kind of a little bit complex here, but I want to talk through it. So let's kind of go how Python's going to read this. So what Python is going to do is it's going to read the right side first. Now the reason that it's going to read the right side first is because it's seeing an equal sign. So it knows something's going to be coming into country here. What is it? Well, it's going to be whatever's over here, so it's going to run that side first.
Okay.
So what it's going to do is it's going to run that side first, which means that it's going to convert that into uppercase letters. So if I had typed in FR for France, it's then going to convert that to capital F, capital R.
Yep.
That's going to be the first part. So this is now what we have, and then it's going to replace what was in our country box with that new value. So what was in there before is now going to be gone and replaced with something else. So again, just to kind of beat this analogy into the ground here, basically imagine, if you will, that you had, let's say, 2 pieces of bread inside of a little box.
Okay.
Keep going with me here.
I'm waiting for it.
Okay, so I had 2 pieces of bread inside of a box. What I did was I pulled out those 2 pieces of bread, and I then put peanut butter and jelly on those. And then I put it back into the box. So what I did, that box is still the exact same placeholder, but I just simply modified the value that was in there and made it something new. So instead of just 2 pieces of bread, now I have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Very nice.
Yes. So what I've done is I've modified what we had and put it back into that box.
So now if you display it on the screen, we should actually see the country in uppercase, regardless of how someone's typed it in.
Exactly. So let's go in and say, hello name. And by the way, I realize that I'm sure that the chat window is abuzz with people yelling at me for this. So let me just kind of go with single quotes here. I kind of went back and forth a little bit on single and double, so I'll just go with single.
Trying to be consistent.
I am.
Good habits. Good job.
Yep. All right. So see, kind of going back to, learn good habits right away. That way, you don't do things like that. Here we go. You live in... And let's go in and say country.
Awesome.
Waiting for my red squigglies to go away. Perfect. So now let me go ahead and hit start. What is my name? Christopher.
Yep.
Enter. What country do I live in? U.S. Whoops, we'll do it in lower.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, okay.
We'll do it in lower. Actually, I'm going to go with FR, even though I don't live in France.
Okay.
But I'm going to go with FR just so we can see the casing a little better, because a big U, big S isn't
that's fine.
as clear. So now I'll just go in and type that in.
Very nice.
And sure enough, it says, hello, Christopher, you live in FR. Perfect. Okay. I also want to do this. I'm going to put in a line break right at the very beginning there, just to kind of make that a little...
Make it look nicer by putting it onto a nice, tidy new line?
Yep.
There you go. Makes a nice little space in front of it.
Very
cool.
Excellent. All right. So let me go back to my slides here.
I like how you're starting to put it all together. Taking what we learned in the previous module, using it inside this module, and that is how coding tends to work. You pick up little things, and what you picked up earlier, suddenly you use later on in your code.
Exactly. Exactly. So now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the different things that are available. So lower, upper, swap case, our different string functions. Ooh, function.
Yeah.
So function, just again, is something with a name that will do something for us, like print and input, upper, lower, all functions. They will do
things for
something. Exactly. Now, because of the fact that we're storing that string inside of a variable, we can use any of those string functions to manipulate those strings. Awesome. All right. Speaking of awesome.
Yes.
What in the world was that little pop-up list?
That is one of the most awesome things that I love about Visual Studio, and there are other coding editors that have it too, but it's called IntelliSense. And what IntelliSense does for you is when Visual Studio knows you're working with a string variable, when you hit that little dot to type in upper, it actually is intelligent enough, hence IntelliSense, to know, oh, wait, you want to call one of the functions to manipulate that string.
Yep.
And Visual Studio knows all the valid functions. So it will actually pop up a little box for you that lists every single function you can choose from. So this is great. So you don't have to remember exactly how something's typed or the exact spelling. Like, was that case swap or swap case, or was that to upper or upper? Little details like that, it'll be right there in the IntelliSense. So that basically, and it's great for lazy coders because instead of having to type the function name, I can just select it from the list.
Exactly. Yeah. And in fact, here, let me, I think the best way to sort of see this is to go in and do it.
Yeah, I think a demo is good for this.
Exactly. So let's just kind of go right back to our country.upper, and I'm just going to eliminate that, and I'm just going to do it again. So we'll just go ahead and say country equals, and let me go ahead and say country, and then you'll notice that if I hit my dot here, now what you're going to notice is that I get that little list of available methods or functions that I can now use. So what I could do is I could say country dot, and then you'll notice that as I start typing, it'll automatically start highlighting what it thinks I want. So since I typed the letter U, it's thinking I probably want upper. Makes sense. Now you'll also notice dot U. Ooh, something cool happened. Let's do that again. So I hit a dot. Typed U, and you'll notice that upper was highlighted.
It was.
Now I could double click.
Yeah, if you're a mouse person, that's how you're going to do it. You're going to click the value you want from that list. But if you're a keyboard person, because some people like to do everything with the keyboard.
Exactly. So if I say U, and if I type the next special character, like a parenthesis, like a dot, that I want after that, it will automatically complete that.
Cool.
So you'll notice that I went paren, and it automatically completed that.
So you typed, so after the U, you typed an open parentheses.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I can go in and I can say country equals country dot U, or dot U, open paren, close paren. So right there, I've saved myself from having to type out PPER. I've saved myself 4 whole keystrokes.
And score points for the lazy program.
Oh, absolutely.
You can use the Enter key as well, though, can't you?
You can use the Enter key. So you can say U and then hit that. And that, but it just won't give you that paren.
The open parentheses, okay.
And you also can say tab as well, and that will also work.
Enter key, tab key, but the advantage of the parentheses is that it gives you the opening parentheses.
Exactly.
So. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. All right. So with that, you're going to notice here that we've got a list of some different functions here. And
all right. This is interesting.
What it is that they do. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of leave it there, and I'll skip right to the answer.
Oh, you're going to the answer. Okay. So we're going to reverse engineer.
Well, sort of.
Doing?
Yeah. So the first big thing that I want to highlight is we're obviously not going to go through every single function that's available.
No, that would take a very long time.
We'd be here a lot longer than 2 days.
Yes.
The second thing is, and this is really the main goal of the slide here, is you're going to notice that a lot of this is intuitive. So you're going to notice, for example, something like replace. What does replace mean in English?
It means replace one thing with something else.
Yeah, it means swap it out. Yeah, exactly. So you're going to notice that we said replace hello, come here, with hi. And so sure enough, when I go in and I take a look, that's exactly what happened. Now, you're also going to notice that we've got capitalize, which would have put in that capital H there, which we happen to already have. So that's why we're kind of getting that little display. It hasn't changed, but it would capitalize, put in that first little H. You're also going to notice that we've got count, and let me escape out just to clear out my screen here. And so count, of course, is going to count the number of
Letter
O's that happen to appear.
Okay.
Now, the one that's maybe a little bit different than what you would expect is find. Now, find, of course, is going to, well, find something. But the question then becomes, well, what's it going to return?
Yeah. How is it going to tell me if it found the word world inside that string?
Exactly. So let's reverse engineer here. Let's take a look at the number that we got. So the number that we got was 6. All right. Well, what's the significance of 6? Well, you're going to notice right up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you're going to notice that there was 6 characters before world.
Okay.
So it's telling us the number of characters that came before whatever it is that we tried to find. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, we got counting based on 0, so it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, and
I was
6.
going to say, it's actually telling you it's a nice way to remember it, though in fact it's telling you the number position of the first letter of the string that's returning.
Exactly. Yeah, that, in fact, if I go back and I do this again, and I started with the 1, 2, 3, just to try to keep it a little bit simpler, but counting in Python, like in most programming languages, starts with 0. So you'll notice that it's actually 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then finally 6.
Right.
So what it's giving me is it's giving me the position, starting position,
where what it was searching
where
for,
that word world is. Now, that's something where you might look at that and you might kind of go, well, all right. But you are going to notice that that is pretty consistent throughout every programming language. That if you're working on a lot of curly-based languages like C# is like this, where it's got index of works just like find here. So again, going back to something that we mentioned before, that what we're trying to do is really kind of teach you these concepts. And so find, like index of. Now again, we're not going to memorize everything.
Yep.
So how do we go in and find them? IntelliSense, and honestly, that's
IntelliSense is great.
Probably the best. When in doubt, type the name of the variable, hit dot.
Yep, and see what pops up.
Exactly. There is documentation.
Yep.
F1 can help you. And then, of course, internet searches.
Absolutely.
Stack Overflow, Bing, just www.bing.com, type in whatever it is that you want.
I want to convert a string to uppercase and see what comes back on your internet search. And make sure you specify the programming language.
Yes.
I am a Python, how to convert string to uppercase. And you will find a link to documentation or a blog post or something in Stack Overflow with some suggestions.
Exactly.
Almost every time.
Yep. Yeah, that's really the way to go. So with that, let's talk a little bit about something like, what happens if they entered in a postal code and we want to convert into uppercase letters.
Because in Canada, postal codes follow a pattern of letter number, letter number, letter number.
Yep.
But they are supposed to be all uppercase.
Yep. And so sure enough, you're going to notice you can just simply do that to upper, and we've actually already done a demo on to upper. Yeah. So I think we're good there. And you are going to notice that every now and then IntelliSense doesn't appear.
And that's annoying. You start relying on it, so when it doesn't appear, you're like, where's my IntelliSense? Bring it back.
And there can be a lot of reasons for this. Sometimes it's because you've got a bug earlier on in your code, you mistype something. And sometimes, and we talked about this earlier, that with variables, you can just simply declare them on the fly. And when Python runs, it will figure out what that variable type is, which is fantastic, when it runs. But unfortunately, at that moment, Visual Studio can't always figure out what's about to happen. And you see this with Python, you see this with JavaScript. And so sometimes what you need to do is just sort of seed, if you will, Python.
Give it a hint.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of tell it what it is that you're doing. And so you'll notice right here that what we did was we just went in and we said postal code equals, and then an empty string.
Yep.
Or put a space in it. Either way would have worked.
Would have worked, yeah.
But, just put something in there that's a string, and so then from there on forward, it will know that it's a string. So you kind of told it right up front, hey, this is going to be a string, and then it was able to go in and treat it as such.
Yeah, that actually came up earlier in the Q&A. Somebody was like, hey, my IntelliSense isn't popping up, and I'm not sure why. Said, if you have a variable name, and you hit the dot to try and bring up the functions to manipulate the contents of that variable, to work with that variable, how can Python know if you're working with a string or a number or a date?
Exactly.
You have to give it a hint.
Yep.
So if it's not popping up and you want that IntelliSense, you might, one of those good habits, you may want to declare your variables ahead of time or create the variables ahead of time with the correct data type. So later in your code, when you're accessing the functions, you get that IntelliSense.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool.
So I've got good news and I've got bad news. Good news is functions are very powerful, can help us out.
Yeah?
Bad news is gives us new opportunities to go in and make mistakes. So you are going to notice that each little line there does have a mistake. And if we just kind of kick through them here real quickly with hello world, what is it?
I think you're missing quotes around the string hello world.
There you go. And with the next one?
The variable name 23 message is not a valid. We cannot start a variable name with a number.
Yep. And then on the next one?
A variable name, I think that's intended to be a single variable called new message.
There you go.
And so you can't have a space in your variable name.
All right. I'm going to skip the next one, and I'm going to go down to item 5 there.
That's a sneaky one, and it's the kind of thing that gets you. I forgot an S in my variable name. And so there is no variable MESAGE. That should have 2 S's.
Okay. And next?
This is a sneaky one. You know what it is? Because the syntax looks good, but the count function expects me to tell it what character I want to count. So I forgot to pass it the value that I want to look for and count.
And you're also going to notice right up here, along those same lines, kind of a sneaky one, you're going to notice no parentheses are there. And that's what that problem is.
I make that typing mistake so often in my code. That's probably one of my most common mistakes, is I forget to put the open close parentheses, and you get these weird error messages, and you're going, why is it complaining about line 6 of my code? And on line 5 of your code, you forgot the open and close parentheses.
Exactly. Yep. So let's kind of come back right over here to my system. So kind of a couple of rules here. Number 1, if you're using a function, you must have parentheses.
Yep.
That's number 1. But number 2 is I'm going to go in and I'm just going to type out count. And what you're going to notice is that when I go in and I open up that parenthesis, you're going to notice that I get a little bit of inline documentation as well. Now, unfortunately, it's not always as clear as you might want. You're going to notice that it says return the number of non-overlapping occurrences of substring in string s start end.
That's clear as mud.
Okay,
meaning not clear at all.
Yeah.
But it does at least give you a hint that I have to enter a value.
It does.
This is the point where if I wasn't sure what to do, I'd go and I'd do an internet search and I'd find some code examples where someone had written me a nice blog post explaining what it did.
And that's really it. Yep.
That's what we do.
Exactly. Okay. So, what do you say we close this off and give everyone a challenge here?
Yes, we need a challenge.
So your challenge is create that program that allows somebody to personalize a story. So take a page from a book or just make up a story. You know, blank ran up a blank with a blank.
Yep.
There you go. And then prompt people, kind of, you know, old little school where you filled in the little blanks there. Go ahead and prompt people to punch in a name, a noun, an adjective, a verb, whatever it is that you want, and then display that story out. And then again, for extra credit, you could go in and try to correct things like casing and so forth. But I would really say kind of focus in on that top one, those top 2 bullet items right there.
That's the set. It is extra credit. If you once you get that working, then go back and see if you can add the extra functionality.
Exactly. So, and again, if you get a little stuck, you know, feel free to go ahead and grab the solutions that we have inside of
But remember, our suggested solution. You may come up with a solution that is even better than ours, and that's all good.
And that's it. So congratulations. You can all now write a program that's going to interact with a user.
Yes. Congrats.
Excellent. So what do you say we take 10?
Yeah.
And then let's come on back and let's talk about something other than strings.
Yes. Because I think when we want to get to the next level of power, we need to work with numbers, and we need to figure out what we can do with those. So we're going to take ourselves to the next level and start messing with some math.
All right. We'll see you guys back here in 10 minutes.